Israel Adesanya is the best representative of mixed martial arts in the game right now. The whole package of who he is and what he does is a work of art. In an era of the sport where phony personas and fabricated beef for the purpose of self-promotion is prominent, the middleweight champion is managing to be more compelling than the rest by simply being himself. Of all the great qualities the last stylebender has shown since he's arrived to the UFC, the thing that means the most to me is his willingness to always go after the consensus most dangerous fight out there for him, which is saying a lot these days, especially for a champion. So many times we've seen it over the years when a fighter wins a championship, they start playing that game of feeling like they're the one calling the shots, and they become really selective over who and when they'll fight. Which, by the way, I don't blame anybody for taking that position. You do have to capitalize on any and all leverage whenever you have it. But I've never heard of one account of Izzy being difficult or refusing to fight so-and-so because they didn't deserve the title shot, or any attempt to avoid any fighter in particular. Anytime there was an obvious next contender, they would be the first name out of his mouth. I believe his history of going about things with this sort of mentality has compounded over the years, and that work has earned him the reputation, the stardom that he's enjoying today as one of the biggest names in the sport right now. Now he's putting it all on the line yet again against Alex Pereira, an individual that not only beat him twice in the kickboxing ring, but the fighter who was the last one to hand him a knockout loss. The Brazilian is in this position this weekend mostly because of the history with Izzy in a different sport, as opposed to it being about what he's accomplished in MMA so far. But that seems to be fine with the fans, and it's certainly fine with Adesanya. If it's the one who the fan base thinks is the most dangerous threat to the title, then that's who gets the shot. I certainly do get putting stock in the fact that Pereira KO'd Izzy in kickboxing. It's something that happened when the last two met, and you have to imagine it's something that's going to have an effect psychologically for both fighters heading into this fight. But what some people out there may not understand or realize is that getting knocked out in kickboxing isn't nearly as damaging to a reputation as it is in MMA. In MMA, when you suffer a knockout loss, it's like a fighter's value takes a major hit. In kickboxing, all the biggest and greatest names in the sport have been knocked out and taken losses, more often than not, on multiple occasions, and it really doesn't affect their value or standing. I wish I could remember where the interview was from so I could quote word for word. I tried looking it up to be able to give credit, but I wasn't able to find it. But years ago, former UFC heavyweight Todd Duffy said something in an interview that stuck with me for all of these years because he summed up professional kickboxing perfectly. At the time, he was planning on transitioning from MMA to kickboxing, and he was asked something along the lines of, "What's your expectations for your kickboxing career?" And he responded with, "Knock people out and get knocked out. It's kickboxing," in this matter-of-fact tone, as if it was the obvious answer. So my point is, while I certainly put stock in those Pereira losses in the ring, I'm not sure it means as much as some will believe. Not to state the obvious here, but MMA is a different sport entirely, and Adesanya has been doing the dance in the sport a lot longer than his opponent. So although it's Izzy who's coming into this one being the guy who's 0-2 in the matchup, it's the champion who has the advantage coming into this middleweight title fight. Izzy is far more comfortable competing in the space these two are going to be competing in. From being well acquainted and experienced with the machine of the UFC and going through all the obligations that come with being a pay-per-view headliner, right down to the physical space of the octagon in contrast to competing in a squared ring. But make no mistake, despite having less experience in both MMA and competing on the biggest platform in combat sports, Pereira has beaten Izzy before and he can do it again. Aside from the fact that his skills are amongst the best to ever step in the octagon from a striking standpoint, he's a hardened individual who's a danger to any man in any weight class that is willing to stand and trade with him. I'm actually heading to New York and I'll be there all week long covering this fight on location, so I really look forward to feeling the vibe from the guys from the media day, to the official weigh-ins, to the ceremonial weigh-ins, all the way up until the moment they walk into the octagon. So it's going to be interesting to roll in the Madison Square Garden and see what happens when the ref gets out of the way on Saturday night. Stepping in there against a fighter as dangerous as Pereira is serious business. But I get the feeling the high stakes on the biggest stage in the world is going to bring out the very best in the middleweight champion.